Lena had always felt invisible, at work, at home, and even among her friends. She moved through life as if she were a shadow, unnoticed and underestimated. Each morning she donned her mask of composure, yet inside a storm raged. No one seemed to see the woman she truly was, just the one who followed the rules and kept her head down. It wasn't until one fateful moment that everything changed. Her boss, Mr. Hargrave, called her into his office with a vacant smile that hinted at something sinister. "Lena," he said, "you've been here for years, but it's time for a change. You've done good work, but we're looking for someone with more leadership potential." His words cut deeper than she expected, revealing something she had been too afraid to face. No matter how hard she tried, she would never be seen as more than just an invisible worker. That moment would break her, but it would also awaken something in her, a spark of defiance that would fuel her transformation. From invisible to invincible, Lena would never be the same again. The following day, Lena arrived at work earlier than usual, her mind racing with everything that had happened. The sting of Mr. Hargrave's words echoed in her head, making it hard to focus. She had been in this position before, being overlooked, dismissed, and pushed aside, but today felt different. She wasn't going to let herself be invisible anymore. As she sat down at her desk, her colleague, Sarah, approached with a smile. "You okay?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Lena forced a smile and nodded, trying to mask the ache in her chest. "Just tired," she replied, but Sarah wasn't convinced. She paused, then said something that struck Lena deeply. "You know, I've always thought you could do so much more, Lena. You're smarter than anyone here, but you're always hiding. Why do you settle for this?" Sarah's words hit harder than expected. Lena had been hiding for so long, but could it really be time to stop? Lena couldn't shake Sarah's words. That night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she realized that she had been living in fear for so long. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being good enough. It wasn't just her job that kept her down, it was her whole life. She had been letting the opinions of others dictate who she was. But Sarah had shown her something she hadn't seen before, that she had a choice. She didn't have to stay in the shadow. She could step into the light, and she could do it on her own terms. With a newfound resolve, Lena set a goal for herself. Tomorrow, she would speak up. She would no longer let fear control her. It was time to change. The next morning, Lena stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. She was determined, but also unsure of how to start. Would anyone even listen to her? Would they think she was just another voice trying to be heard? She dressed in a bold new outfit, something she never would have worn before. Her reflection seemed different, stronger. As she walked into the office, she could feel the eyes on her. It was just a usual morning, but for Lena, it felt like the first step in a much bigger journey. At her desk, she noticed that Sarah had left a note for her. "You've got this." The words seemed simple, but they gave Lena the boost she needed. She wasn't alone. Today, she would show everyone what she was capable of. Lena walked into the office, her head held high, feeling the eyes of her colleagues on her. It was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment she would show them who she truly was. The day passed in a blur of meetings, emails, and conversations. But in each one, Lena spoke up. Her voice wasn't as shaky as she had expected. She wasn't waiting for approval anymore. As the day wore on, something inside her shifted. By the end of the day, she didn't just feel noticed, she felt powerful. She had taken the first step in reclaiming her life, her voice, and her worth. She wasn't invisible anymore. That night, as she sat down to dinner, Lena smiled to herself. It was the beginning of something new. Lena's first week of change was challenging but liberating. She spoke up in every meeting, pushed back against expectations, and took on more responsibilities. But as the days went on, doubts began to creep in. What if they were just humoring her? What if her new boldness was only temporary, and she would slip back into the shadows once again? She had always been the quiet one, the one who listened and never took the spotlight. Now, in her newfound space, she wasn't sure how to reconcile who she had been with who she was trying to become. But when she looked around the office, she saw her colleagues, and Sarah in particular, watching her closely. Sarah had always been a supporter, but now, her admiration seemed like something more, like hope. Lena realized that by showing up for herself, she was showing others that they too could do the same. The weight of that realization was both humbling and empowering. The next day, Lena arrived at work earlier than usual, her mind racing with everything that had happened. The sting of Mr. Hargrave's words echoed in her head, making it hard to focus. She had been in this position before, being overlooked, dismissed, and pushed aside, but today felt different. She wasn't going to let herself be invisible anymore. As she sat down at her desk, her colleague Sarah approached with a smile. "You okay?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Lena forced a smile and nodded, trying to mask the ache in her chest. "Just tired," she replied, but Sarah wasn't convinced. She paused, then said something that struck Lena deeply. "You know, I've always thought you could do so much more, Lena. You're smarter than anyone here, but you're always hiding. Why do you settle for this?" Sarah's words hit harder than expected. Lena had been hiding for so long, but could it really be time to stop? The following day, Lena ran into Sarah by the elevator. "You're killing it this week," Sarah said, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "I can see it in you. You're not just participating, you're leading." Lena smiled, but the compliment didn't sit right. Was she really leading, or just pretending to be someone she wasn't? Sarah must have noticed the hesitation in Lena's face because she added, "Don't doubt yourself, Lena. You're more than capable. You've always been." That's when Lena realized something important. She wasn't just pretending to be someone else. She was becoming the person she had always been inside, the one who had been buried under fear and insecurity for so long. She wasn't faking her confidence, she was uncovering it. The following weekend, Lena attended a leadership seminar, something she would have never considered in the past. She sat among strangers, feeling out of place at first. But as the day wore on, she began to see the pattern. Most of the people in the room were not extraordinary. They were regular individuals who had simply decided to take a chance. Lena realized that the only thing separating them from her was the decision to act. No one had been born with inherent leadership. Everyone had to work for it, even those who seemed so confident. By the end of the day, Lena was exhausted but exhilarated. She had taken the first tangible step in reshaping her life, and it felt like a victory, no matter how small. As she walked out of the seminar hall, her mind was already planning the next move. Back at work on Monday, Lena found herself in a meeting with her team. It was her turn to present a project update, and this time, she didn't hesitate. She spoke with confidence, made decisions on the fly, and even challenged some of the ideas being presented. For the first time in her career, she felt in control, not just of the project but of her own narrative. When the meeting ended, her manager, Mr. Hargrave, approached her. "Lena," he said, his tone uncharacteristically warm, "you did great today. Keep this up, and we'll have a lot to discuss." A small victory, but one that meant everything. Lena had taken her place, and there was no going back now. Lena's newfound confidence was tested when the next project at work required her to step into a leadership role. She was assigned to manage a team of people who were much more experienced than her. Her nerves were on edge, but she knew she couldn't back down now. As she sat in the meeting with her new team, the weight of expectations pressed down on her. "Lena," said Mark, male 40 years old, one of the senior team members, "we've done this project 100 times. We know what works and what doesn't. Let us handle it." The room went silent as all eyes turned to her. Lena clenched her fists under the table, but she wasn't about to let them dismiss her so easily. "I'm leading this team," she said firmly, "and I'm going to make sure this project goes as smoothly as possible. I'm not going to let past experiences dictate what we can achieve." Mark raised an eyebrow, but there was respect in his gaze. She wasn't backing down. The project wasn't as smooth as Lena had hoped. There were constant disagreements, and she found herself questioning every decision she made. The tension in the office was thick, and Lena began to doubt if she could truly lead this team. She spent late nights working alone, reading through reports trying to find solutions. One evening, Sarah called her. "You okay? You've been distant," she asked. Lena sighed, her voice heavy. "I'm struggling, Sarah. They don't take me seriously. I'm just not cut out for this." Sarah's voice was calm but firm. "You've come so far, Lena. Don't let them pull you down. You're meant for more than this." Her words lingered, and Lena sat in silence, contemplating what Sarah had said. She realized that the battle wasn't just external, it was internal. She had to fight the doubts within herself before she could lead others with confidence. The next day, Lena made a decision. She wasn't going to let self-doubt control her anymore. She stood up during the next team meeting and presented her ideas, this time with a renewed sense of self-assurance. "I've been thinking," Lena said, her voice steady. "I know there's been resistance to my approach, but I believe we can still make this work. Let's try something different. Take a risk. We can't be afraid of failing. We need to push the boundaries." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Mark spoke up. "I still think we should stick to what works," he said, his voice challenging. But this time, Lena didn't back down. "I respect your experience, Mark, but it's time for a change. We need to take this project in a new direction." The tension in the room shifted. It wasn't just Lena asserting herself, it was her believing in her own vision. After the meeting, Lena felt the weight of her words. She knew that standing up to Mark had been a bold move, and she wasn't sure how it would play out. As the team began to work on the project, the tension between Lena and Mark simmered beneath the surface. But Lena refused to let it derail her. She worked harder than ever, double-checking every detail, making sure that the team was aligned with her vision. Despite the lingering uncertainty, Lena's commitment to the project grew. She saw the potential in her team, and she was determined to help them see it too. The breakthrough came when the team, initially skeptical, began to offer suggestions that aligned with Lena's vision. They were starting to believe in the change, just as she had. The project was a success. When the final presentation was made to the higher-ups, Lena stood confidently at the front, leading the discussion. The results spoke for themselves. What had seemed impossible at the start was now a resounding success. As the meeting wrapped up, Mr. Hargrave stood and shook her hand. "Well done, Lena. You've exceeded expectations," he said, his tone filled with rare admiration. Lena smiled, but it wasn't just the praise that felt good. It was the knowledge that she had proven herself, not only to him, but to herself. She had faced the conflict, the doubts, and the resistance, and she had come out victorious. This victory was only the beginning. Lena was feeling on top of the world. The project had been a success, her team was more unified, and she was starting to see the fruits of her hard work. But just when she thought she had everything figured out, a new challenge emerged. One evening, Lena received an email from her old colleague, Rachel. It was brief, but the message made Lena's stomach drop. "I know what you did. You're not as untouchable as you think." Lena stared at the screen, her mind racing. What did Rachel mean? The email didn't explain anything further, and for the first time in weeks, Lena felt a chill of fear run through her. She had been working hard to prove herself, but now it seemed like someone knew something that could bring it all crashing down. The realization hit her. This victory wasn't as solid as she had thought. Lena spent the entire night trying to make sense of the cryptic email. She went over every moment of her work in the last few months, trying to find a clue, a hint of what Rachel might know. By the morning, the weight of the situation had become unbearable. She couldn't focus at work, and even when Sarah approached her for coffee, Lena couldn't shake the nagging feeling in her gut. "You look like you haven't slept," Sarah observed, her voice tinged with concern. Lena forced a smile. "Just stressed, lots to do." But Sarah wasn't fooled. "Talk to me, Lena. You're carrying something. Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone." Lena hesitated, unsure if she could confide in Sarah, but something about her friend's unwavering support made her feel safer than she had in days. She finally admitted, "I think Rachel knows something about me. Something that could ruin everything I've worked for." The following week, Lena decided to face Rachel head-on. She called her old colleague and arranged a meeting at a nearby cafe. When Lena arrived, Rachel was already sitting at a table, her back turned. She looked up as Lena approached, and a slow, knowing smile spread across her face. "I see you've been doing well," Rachel said, her tone both casual and pointed. Lena sat down across from her, her heart racing. "What do you know, Rachel?" she asked, her voice steady but demanding. Rachel leaned back in her chair, the smile never leaving her face. "Let's just say I know about the choices you've made to get ahead, the ones you've kept quiet about." Lena's blood ran cold. How much did Rachel know? And how far was she willing to go to expose her? Rachel's words hung in the air like a threat. Lena's mind raced, trying to piece together what Rachel was referring to. But before Lena could speak, Rachel continued. "You know, it's a bit too late for secrets. People talk, Lena. And when they do, everything you've built could come crashing down." Lena fought to keep her composure, but her heart was pounding in her chest. "Oh, what do you want from me?" she asked, her voice low. Rachel shrugged, her expression casual. "Nothing really. Just a little acknowledgement of the truth. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about." With that, she stood up, leaving Lena sitting at the table, alone with her thoughts. As Lena watched Rachel leave, her mind raced. What had she done? What truth was she hiding? She realized with growing dread that Rachel knew the one thing Lena had never been able to face, her own past mistakes. That night, Lena went home and sat in front of the mirror, the words "I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about" echoing in her mind. The truth that Rachel had alluded to was something Lena had buried deep inside her. Years ago, she had made a choice, a decision that had seemed necessary at the time but now threatened everything she had worked for. She had manipulated a situation to her advantage, a decision she regretted but had never confessed. The guilt had eaten at her from the inside, and now it was coming back to haunt her. Lena realized that in order to move forward, she had to confront this dark chapter in her past. She couldn't keep running from it. Tomorrow, she would make things right, no matter the cost. The following morning, Lena walked into the office with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. Her heart pounded as she approached Mr. Hargrave's office. She knew what she had to do, face the consequences of her actions. She couldn't move forward until she dealt with the past. She knocked on the door and entered without waiting for a response. Mr. Hargrave looked up, surprised. "Lena, what's this about?" he asked. Lena took a deep breath. "I need to come clean about something," she began, her voice steady but vulnerable. "There's something I've been hiding for a long time, something that could change everything. I need to tell you the truth." Mr. Hargrave raised an eyebrow, his demeanor shifting from confusion to curiosity. "Go on," he said, his tone now more attentive. Lena's stomach tightened. This was the moment. Lena's confession spilled out, each word heavier than the last. She spoke of her past mistake, the decision she had made years ago to manipulate a situation to her advantage. As she explained everything, she felt the weight lifting off her chest, but she also felt exposed, vulnerable. "I made a choice," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "It was wrong and I regret it. I should have been honest then, but I was afraid. I couldn't bear the thought of losing everything I worked for. And now I'm afraid it's going to cost me everything." Mr. Hargrave sat in silence for a moment, his gaze fixed on her. "I appreciate your honesty, Lena," he said at last, his tone surprisingly calm. "This isn't an easy thing to confess, but what matters now is how you move forward. You've shown that you're capable of growth, and that's what I value most." After the meeting, Lena felt a strange mix of relief and fear. She had come clean, but now the uncertainty lingered. As the day wore on, she couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Would her colleagues find out? Would they look at her differently? When she saw Sarah later that afternoon, Lena felt an overwhelming urge to share what had happened. "I told him everything," she confessed, her voice shaky. "I told Mr. Hargrave about the mistake I made. I thought it would cost me my job, but he didn't fire me. He said I could still move forward, but I'm not sure if I can forgive myself." Sarah reached out, placing a hand on Lena's shoulder. "You don't need anyone's forgiveness but your own," she said softly. You've already proven you're capable. You can rise from this, Lena. You're stronger than you know. Lena returned to work the next day, her steps lighter than before. It wasn't that everything was suddenly perfect, but she felt different. She had taken control of her story, and that made all the difference. As she walked into the office, she noticed something strange. Her colleagues were treating her differently. There was a sense of respect in their eyes, and for the first time, Lena felt like she truly belonged. Mark, who had been one of her harshest critics, approached her. "I wasn't sure about you at first," he said, his voice low. "But I've seen how you've handled things. You've earned my respect." Lena nodded, her heart swelling with pride. She had proven herself, not just to others, but to herself. The battle wasn't over, but she was no longer invisible. She was invincible. That evening, as Lena sat at home reflecting on the day, she realized something powerful. The journey to invincibility hadn't been about external validation or praise. It had been about finding her voice and standing firm in her own truth. For so long she had lived in the shadows of self-doubt and fear. But now, those shadows had no power over her. She had reclaimed her identity, her confidence, and her strength. And as she looked out the window, watching the sunset, Lena knew that this was just the beginning. The world was waiting for her, and she was finally ready to take on whatever came next. Weeks passed since Lena's confrontation with her past, and with each day, she grew stronger. The once overwhelming weight of her secret no longer haunted her. Instead, it had become part of her story, a story of growth, forgiveness, and transformation. At work, Lena's leadership role continued to expand, and the respect she had longed for from her colleagues was now firmly in place. She no longer feared judgment or failure. She knew that her past had shaped her, but it didn't define her. Lena had proven herself, and now, more than ever, she felt the power of her own resilience. One morning, as she prepared for a meeting with the executives, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. She was no longer invisible, she was invincible. Later that week, Lena sat down for lunch with Sarah. The two had become closer, their bond strengthened by their shared journey. "I can't believe how far you've come," Sarah said, her voice full of admiration. "You're not just talking about change now, you're living it." Lena smiled, taking a bite of her sandwich. "It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I never realized how much I was holding myself back until I faced everything head on." Sarah leaned in, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I think you're ready for even more. The way people look at you now. There's no going back, you've shown them all what you're capable of." Lena's smile widened. "And I've shown myself too." It was true, her journey wasn't over, but she had taken the most important step. She had started living for herself, not for anyone else's approval. As the months went by, Lena found herself taking on new challenges. She applied for a higher position in the company, one that would allow her to shape the future of the business. It was a huge step, but Lena no longer shied away from risks. She had learned that the road to success wasn't just about working hard, it was about having the courage to pursue what felt right, even when the outcome was uncertain. When she received the call that she had been selected for the position, Lena couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. She had earned it, not just through hard work, but through self-belief. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged. She had found her place in the world. Lena stood in front of the mirror one last time, as she had done so many times before, but this time was different. She looked at herself, not with uncertainty, but with pride. She had come so far. From the quiet, overlooked woman who once felt invisible to the confident, assertive leader she had become. It wasn't just the job or the respect that had changed. She had changed. She had discovered her own strength, her own voice, and in doing so she had created a path for others to follow. As she stood there, she realized that the hardest battles were the ones fought within. But those were the battles that brought the greatest rewards. And she had won. That evening, as Lena sat at home, reflecting on the last few months, she realized how far she had come. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had shaped her into someone who was unrecognizable to her former self. She had faced her fears, made difficult decisions, and emerged stronger for it. But more than anything, Lena had learned that true strength came not from others' expectations, but from within. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. As she looked out the window, the city stretched before her, vast and full of potential. For the first time in her life, Lena felt truly at peace with who she was. She had stepped into the light, and it felt like the world was finally hers to conquer. It had been a year since Lena had taken control of her narrative. The once overwhelming fear and self-doubt were now distant memories, replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. She had achieved everything she had set out to do, and more. But today, standing in front of the mirror, she realized that her journey wasn't just about external achievements. It was about finding peace within herself. No longer did she seek validation or approval from others. She had learned to be her own source of strength. As she prepared for another big presentation, this time to the board of directors, she felt a calm she had never known before. She was ready, not because she was perfect, but because she had embraced who she was and where she was headed. The boardroom was intimidating, with the weight of the company's future resting in the hands of the team. But Lena walked in with a sense of ease, no longer feeling like an imposter in the room. As she presented her ideas, she noticed the board members, once skeptical, were now listening with rapt attention. The respect she had earned was tangible, and she could feel it. It wasn't just her words that carried weight, it was the certainty in her voice, the clarity in her vision. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, followed by nods of approval. "Excellent work, Lena," one of the board members said, breaking the silence. Lena smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had made it. Not just in her career, but in her life. She had come full circle. After the meeting, Lena sat at her desk, reflecting on everything she had accomplished. Her journey had not been easy, but it had shaped her into someone she was proud of. She had faced her deepest fears and emerged stronger. She had fought for her place at the table, and now she had earned it. But more than that, Lena realized that her journey was never about becoming someone else. It was about becoming herself, the person she had always been inside, but had been too afraid to embrace. She was no longer invisible. She had stepped into her own light. As she looked out the window, she knew that there were still many challenges ahead. But for the first time, she felt ready for anything. The future was hers to create. Lena's phone buzzed on her desk, and she glanced at it. A message from Sarah popped up. "I knew you had it in you." Lena smiled to herself and replied, "Thank you for always believing in me." She realized how far they had come together. Sarah had been there through the darkest times, reminding Lena of her worth when she couldn't see it. Their friendship had been a cornerstone of her strength. Lena took a moment to reflect on how far she had come, not just professionally, but personally. The path she had walked had shaped her into someone resilient, someone who knew her value. She no longer needed external validation. She knew who she was, and that was enough. As the day came to a close, Lena stepped out of the office. The city streets were busy, but she felt like she was walking with purpose, each step more sure than the last. She had done it. She had gone from invisible to invincible, not by changing who she was, but by embracing who she had always been. She had faced every obstacle with courage, and every doubt with determination. And now, she was ready for whatever came next. The world was waiting for her. She wasn't just going to exist in it, she was going to leave her mark. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow on the streets. Lena smiled to herself. The future was wide open, and she was ready to step into it.